Putting the Autism Puzzle Pieces Together, Chapter 1, A Brief History of Autism, Video number 3, starting off with the subject of the DSM's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The DSM, published by the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, provides the psychological and psychiatric establishment with diagnostic criteria for all the issues that they deal with. DSM-1 was published in 1952. DSM-2 was published in 1968. The seventh printing of the DSM-2 in 1974. And based on the research that I did on this, even if it wasn't the reason for it, one of the major reasons for the changes in the seventh printing was because the homosexual community objected to what was written in the first two DSMs about them, referring to homosexuality as a mental illness, and because one of their ranks was a psychologist, he was able to persuade the American Psychiatric Association to revise what they said, and it took a series of revisions in the future DSMs in order before everybody was before they came up with an acceptable solution. So anyways, the DSM-3 came out in 1980, and it's my understanding that that's the first time that autism was actually in the DSM. Prior to that, autistics were diagnosed with childhood schizophrenia. Okay, even after Dr. Connor had coined the term autism, it was still associated with childhood schizophrenia, and so it's my understanding is that the official diagnosis that would be given would be childhood schizophrenia, and then autism would just be some comorbid or whatever they would say, but basically the official diagnosis that all autistics would be given, it's my understanding, would be childhood schizophrenics. Okay, and that was up until 1980 when the DSM-3 came out. Okay, and the DSM-3 revised in 1983. That's when the homosexual community finally got all the things rewritten to their liking. Okay, the DSM-4, which came out in 1994, was the first appearance of Asperger's in the DSM. So basically, as I stated, in the first video of this chapter, that Laura Wing had coined the term in 1980, and it took until and so basically, it missed being included in the DSM-3, but it did finally appear in the DSM-4 14 years later. Okay, then the DSM-4 text revised came out in 2000, and then the DSM-5 came out in 2013, which completely overhauls the autism spectrum category in ways that I absolutely cannot explain. Okay, and I've actually had my friend Tara Marshall, who's the speech language pathology assistant. She understands all the mumbo jumbo in the DSMs, and so she's read both the DSM-4 and the DSM-5, and can explain what the different terminologies meant, and also explain what the actual differences are, and as far as what impact these changes actually make. And so basically, my whole take on the entire DSM-5 controversy is that in spite of all the concerns of how autistics they're going to lose their diagnosis and they're going to lose their benefits. Well, first of all, none of us have been declared normal. Okay, what they basically did is they gave some autistics a different label. Big whoop-de-doo, okay? As far as most autistics, we're sick and tired of all these different labels, and so particularly me, I really could care less what label you decide to put on me, because, I've had enough of them over the years that it really no longer matters. But the bottom line is, not one single autistic was declared normal by the DSM-5. Okay, not one of them lost their diagnosis in the DSM-5. And as far as whether or not autistics are going to lose their benefits, what benefits? When you're talking about higher functioning autistics like myself, people are actually shocked that I managed to get on SSI. How did I do it? Well, fortunately, one of my favorite subjects in school was history, and so asking me to recite the President of the United States backwards, that kind of fit into me, so I was really able to show off the fact that I have a much better memory than most people do. Okay, whereas if my interest would have been science, I might not have even gotten diagnosed. I'm sure that all the experts, oh no, it doesn't work like that, well, in any case, for some reason, I was able to get my diagnosis at the age of 40, where mostly autistics, and qualified for SSI, where most autistics, are struggling, to get that recognition. Okay, and so, in any case, so as far as losing benefits, like I said, most autistics aren't getting higher functioning autistics. The ones that everybody was afraid would be kicked off by making more rigid diagnostic standards for autism. They're not getting benefits anyways. Okay, I applied, for vocational rehab about a month ago, and so I'm still waiting to see if I'm going to qualify at where I'm going to be at on the waiting list. If I forget whether level 1 or level 3 is the highest, but bottom line is, the most severe, okay, you will get, vocational training. If you're the least severe, which I have a feeling I'm going to be, then there's simply not enough money to help all these people. Forget about what label they have. Okay, this is about their functionality. Okay, and based on my functionality, I may not be low enough functioning in order to get any assistance from vocational rehab. And so when you're talking about how all these autistics are going to lose their benefits, what benefits? We're not getting benefits. Most of us are getting few, if any, benefits. And so as far as the DSM itself, I was told by another autistic self-advocate that the DSMs are not actually legally binding. Okay, that the American Psychiatric Association is a private organization that makes recommendations, and that basically all the governmental agencies in the United States basically take their recommendations as binding, but nevertheless they're not actually legally binding, and actually propose the idea that we simply ignore the DSMs altogether and simply go about our own way. And there's actually some appeal to that, especially when you start to consider how they're defining autism. Basically, from what has been interpreted to me by Tara, and explaining what the diagnostic criteria of the DSM is, it seems obvious to me that they're basing their diagnosis on the issues that affect other people. Okay, the autistic issues that affect other people. And what I mean by this is that there's a lot of issues that affect autistics. Okay, the overt ones that affect other people are part of the DSM diagnosis. That the more subtle ones, the issues that only an autistic would truly understand, would truly realize that autistics have, the APA is completely oblivious to these issues, because basically from what I've been told, that they have no interest in allowing autistics to have any say in the diagnosis, and their reasoning for this, from what I've been told, is that they don't allow their patients to basically have a say in how things are, in the diagnostic process, and how these diagnoses are developed. And so I find that quite interesting, because rewind back again to the DSM-2, the 7th printing of the DSM-2, what exactly happened there? The homosexual community objected to what was being said about them in the DSM. They revolted. They had a member of their community who was a psychologist and applied pressure to them to change what the DSM says about them to something that is more acceptable. Okay, so if the homosexual community is allowed to do this, why isn't the autistic community allowed to do this? Especially when we can especially when we can testify to the fact that we know that they've gotten a lot of things wrong about us, that a lot of these assumptions that they're making about us are completely erroneous, and if you'd let us explain what's actually going on inside our head, instead of thinking that you're some kind of a mind reader, that can read our minds, then we would completely change, not just the diagnostic criteria for autism, but we would be able to change how autism is dealt with in our society. And this is something that, from what I understand, the APA has absolutely no interest in, but the autistic self-advocacy community, on the other hand, is very interested in.